Welcome to Shifting Dimensions, a program that explores the nature of consciousness in dialogue form within the matrix of the shifting time we live in. And tonight we're going to talk about two interesting subjects that on their surface don't appear to have much in common, but as we explore it, we're going to find that there's much more connection between the two subjects than would otherwise appear. We're going to talk about remote viewing, or as our guest calls it, resonant viewing, and crop circles. And we have here tonight to talk with us Simeon Hein. Dr. Simeon Hein received his PhD in sociology from Washington State University in 1992. His main areas of interest include nonlinear research methods, complexity theory, technology, and society. He first learned remote viewing in 1996 and worked as an instructor at the Farsight Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. He has taught resonant viewing at the Institute for Resonance since 1997. His first book is Opening Minds, A Journey of Extraordinary Encounters, Crop Circles, and Resonance. And since the publication of Opening Minds in 2002, Dr. Hein has given over 298 radio and TV interviews, but this is the 300th, isn't it?
That's right.
Tonight, we are at number 300. His most recent work is Planetary Intelligence, 101 Easy Steps to Energy, Well-Being, and Natural Insight. Simeon, it's really good to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, thanks for having me here tonight, Joe.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I thought we'd try to divide the show into two, if we can. And first, let's talk a little bit about remote viewing. You know, we can talk a little bit about the history and stuff, but I want to get into your research and where things are at right now, more than get too much into the basics.
Right.
Okay, why don't you go ahead with
well, you know, the
viewing.
interesting thing about remote viewing is that even though it's like a subtle energy skill and a sensing ability that we all have, it's kind of built into us, it was actually brought to us by the military starting in the 1970s when they were looking for ways of creating psychic spies, because they thought at the time that the Soviet Union had these psychic spying programs, and they were a little concerned about the security of some of our more sensitive facilities and missile silos and so forth.
The Soviets started first, didn't they? With this
Yeah,
program?
because they've always been a little more open to this sort of process than we have in the West. And they've had a lot of research into psychic ability and especially psychokinetics.
Yeah, I heard since the 50s they were doing
since the 50s, and you know, going back to Stalin even, they were doing research in this. And they actually thought we had a program in it for communication between ships with the Navy, but it really wasn't true. But it got them going in their program in the 50s. The paranoia was mutual, and they fed on each other, and we said, they have it, we have to have it too. Right. So in the 70s, they started testing these natural psychics, Ingo Swann and others, Pat Price over at Stanford Research Institute in California.
Uri Geller was in on that one too.
Uri Geller, a whole bunch of other folks were there. And these psychics convinced these physicists over there, mainly Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, that this was a real phenomenon. These folks could do things that, at least they could do it. They could see it with their controlled procedures, putting them in sealed rooms and so forth, Faraday cages, that they could affect magnetometers buried in the floor.
And the fact that it was a 20-year or 25-year program, the Stargate program, it lasted that long, gives you some idea that they had some feeling of credibility in all this.
Right, because
keep it going that long.
Exactly. These natural psychics figured out what they were doing in their minds and created a system that they could train the average person to do this. And that's what kept going for 20 years, is they had a program going until officially, in 1995, we're told, to train average people to be, you know, psychics, people like you and me. And when it became declassified, people started teaching, and I learned from one of these people who had learned it from one of the people in the military program, Dr. Courtney Brown. And I originally, Joe, I was a skeptic. I didn't think this was possible. I didn't think, you know, the average person could just sit down and mentally see something at a distance. At least I didn't think I could do it, you know, because I'm coming from this academic background. You know, you really think by the time you get your PhD, you know the way reality is, right? Right. Because you've read so much, you know. And I had never heard even the word remote viewing.
And that could make it even harder, too, huh? With all that education that tells you probably isn't possible. And then when you start to do it, you know.
Yeah, it's much harder because you're very skeptical. But here's the thing. These remote viewing folks had the evidence. They've been doing their own statistical studies for a long time. And you could see that people that do this are getting results that are not due to chance. And when I took the course, I was really impressed that within a few days I was getting results. I was able to describe distant locations, people, events that there was no way I could know about ahead of time. I mean, I'm sitting in this gray cubicle facing a wall, windowless building. The target is behind me in a folder. I'm never even looking over there. And yet I can draw it perfectly, actually in my mind go to the site where the people are, describe the scene, the intentions, the meaning, the emotions. And I got to tell you, my mind was not so happy with this when I was doing it because I couldn't understand how I was doing it. But all I know is when the session was over, I looked at what I'd written, I looked at what the target was, and sometimes, not every time, but sometimes, a lot more than you'd expect by chance, they matched up very well.
Isn't that amazing? And I think that's probably ultimately what it would take for anybody to really believe it.
Yeah.
When they start seeing results over and over again within themselves.
Right.
You know, I got Ed Dame's little remote viewing kit a few years ago. And me and my friends, Jim, and some other people, you know, we got together and started doing it. I started doing it. I got kind of addicted to it, you know. I mean, the protocols, I think, are a lot like yours. And you can get into your protocols, too, you know, what kinds of things that you do. We should mention that remote viewing is a scientific word for clairvoyance, really.
Pretty much.
Isn't it? I mean,
it's just a little more directed, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's all the same sort of channel. It's another channel of communications that we all have built into us. Joe, the thing about it is it's so subtle you don't even know it's there.
Yeah.
Because all of us have had so many years of schooling and education. We've had those subtle voices in the back of our minds, the intuition, whatever you want to call it. We've kind of had that pushed to the background while this kind of...
By all the noise.
The noise and the strength of the logical mind, the logical, rational mind, because it's so emphasized, some say overemphasized in Western civilization, the way we're trained to believe reality is linear, logical thinking. We don't give a lot of credence to that, what some indigenous peoples call the original mind. It's a more subtle sensing mind. Joe, this is what remote viewing uses. It's nothing really superstitious or mystical or magical at all. In some ways, it's just that voice of intuition that we all have built into us. And if you train it a little bit...
Very natural phenomenon.
Very natural. It's just right there. But you need to remember, you know, we don't actually train people to do this. We teach them to remember. That's all any remote viewing training does. It teaches you to remember something you already know how to do, but you probably forgot because no one rewarded you in school for just getting an answer intuitively if you couldn't justify how you got the answer. So you push it all away. But, you know, the best creators we have in science, Einstein and other folks like that, they don't know how they came up with their ideas. It took them years to mathematically show it made sense. Flashes of intuition. Intuition is very powerful. That's what we're learning.
And later came the mathematical justification in a lot of cases.
Exactly.
So, so we're talking about an ability that we all have. Would you say that it's more right-brained?
Yes, definitely.
So we're talking about the difference in a way between the right brain and the left brain.
Yes.
A modern way of thinking about it.
The left brain and the right brain really do different tasks. You know, the left brain is more like the logical, rational,
linear.
Yeah,
right?
Some call it the sign mind. It works with symbols when you're working with words and translating ideas into letters and symbols. That is the left brain. You know the left brain because when you were a kid and you used to draw things that look like stick figures, not very realistic looking, that's the left brain doing it. When the right brain draws, if you've ever taken that course, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, Betty Edwards, there's two different ways to draw. And if you read her book, you know, I went through it in art class in high school. It really works. If you actually look at the way things are and don't think about what they are, think about what they look like and draw the shades and the shapes without even thinking what the function is, then you can draw very well, even if you didn't think you could draw. I was one of those people who didn't think they could draw. You know, the military viewers actually had to go through that Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain course as part of the military training. So it's exactly on the right side of the brain that you're right about this, and that is where this ability is. Now, to do that, Joe, you have to get the left brain, the logical mind, to be a little more quiet. I have a lot of trouble with that sometimes, but it's the talking part.
Yeah.
Has to learn to be a little more quiet, to listen, to almost respect the right side of the mind. And we haven't been taught to respect these subtle, kind of nonlinear, holistic, intuitive sort of processes. We look down on them in a way. You know, it's from our culture, from our religious backgrounds, to see things that are more material and more linear as superior to the intuitive, spontaneous. I think it's beginning to change now, but this is what we've learned.
So theoretically, a person who, say, is a good meditator would maybe have a little bit of an edge in learning remote viewing. Yeah,
a lot of the original remote viewers did some sort of meditation, mind-body practice, so forth. Yeah,
and I like the fact that a lot of the remote viewers, you know, afterwards, after they left the Stargate program or the Stargate program was over, became remote viewing instructors, and they went into spiritual remote viewing. I mean, they connected it immediately with the spirit world and our spiritual growth.